continues the Titanic disaster hearings. I'm TJ, I'm our technical director. All of the actors you'll be hearing tonight are volunteering their time and their talent from their homes to bring a little bit of entertainment into your homes. We want to thank them all very much for joining us. We'd also like to thank our friend, Your Friendly Neighborhood Shakespeare, for hosting us on his pages. Check out his website, shakespeareapproves.com, and his Patreon at patreon.com/Shakespeare. To find out more about him at the aforementioned website, including information about his live shows where he's traveling all over the place. And you can also visit him on his Facebook page, Shakespeare Approves, Your Friendly Neighborhood Shakespeare. We will have links to visit him as well as some of our other performer friends in the comments of this video. As always, we want to acknowledge and thank all of the medical professionals and essential workers who have been working for far too long to keep us all as healthy and safe as possible. If you're interested in more information about our totally volunteer organization, check out our website, zenithplayers.com. Feel very free to check out our very attractive donations page. 100% of all donations go towards production costs, which have lately consisted of the various subscriptions that allow for these readings to happen, and will also go towards our November live in-person production of Bernhardt Hamlet. If you'd like to read with us in future projects, just send us an email at casting@zenithplayers.com, and we will get you on board. Join us next week as we spin the wheel of Shakespeare for The Tempest. But for now, relax and enjoy Steve Anderson as Senator Smith, Emily Brennan as Mr. Cottam, Shakira Searle as Harold Bride, Andrew Gellos as Frederick Sammis, Andrea Atwood as Guglielmo Marconi and Mr. Burlingham, Mira Singer as Mr. Herbert John Pittman in the second day of the Titanic disaster hearings. Saturday, April 20th, 1912. Subcommittee of the Committee on Commerce, United States Senate, New York, New York. Subcommittee met at 10:50 a.m. at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. Present were Senator William Alden Smith, Chairman, and Senator Newlands. Present also were Mr. George Euler, Supervising Inspector General, Steamboat Inspection Service, Department of Commerce and Labor, Mr. J. Bruce Ismay, General Manager of the International Mercantile Marine Company, Charles C. Burlingham, Esquire, and J. Parker Curlin, Esquire, representing the White Star Line, Emerson E. Parvin, Esquire, Secretary, International Mercantile Marine Company, Guglielmo Marconi, President of the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company, and others.
Gentlemen, I'm very sorry to have delayed beginning the hearing beyond the hour set this morning. A conference between my colleagues and myself made it necessary. I'm going to proceed this morning by asking Mr. Cottam, the Marconi operator on the Carpathia, to take the witness chair again. Mr. Cottam, you detailed yesterday when you were last interrogated by the committee the work that you did on the Carpathia up to the time of the last message received from the Titanic.
Yes, sir.
And to that message, you made reply by direction of the captain?
Yes, sir.
Will you relate the captain's last message to the Titanic?
The captain sent a message to the effect that they were to have the lifeboats ready. We got ours ready and were steaming as fast as we could in the direction of the position of the vessel given.
Was anything further said?
No, sir.
And you received no further answer to that message?
No, sir.
You also detailed the work that was done after reaching the scene of the collision and the sinking of the Titanic?
Yes.
Did you receive any communication from either a Marconi coast station or any other station from any officer of the White Star Line?
Do you mean as soon as we reached the spot?
I mean from the time you reached the scene of the catastrophe until you reached port in New York.
I was in communication with some boat or other the whole of the time, sir.
You were in communication with some boat or other the whole of the time?
Yes, sir.
Did any message come signed officially by any officer of the White Star Line?
I had one or two from the Baltic, sir.
One or two from the Baltic?
Yes, sir.
To what effect?
I cannot remember, sir.
Were they signed or merely transmitted?
They were official messages, sir, but I cannot remember whether they were signed or not.
I wish you would speak a little louder. I cannot quite hear you myself.
They were official messages, but whether or not they were signed by the captain of the Baltic, I could not say.
Do you recall the contents?
I cannot remember. I have no record of any of them at all.
Were they messages from the Baltic or transmitted through the Baltic from any coast station?
There was communication with the Baltic and the Carpathia the whole of the time.
And you cannot recall what those messages were?
No, sir. There were too many of them, sir.
I'll ask you specifically whether you received any message indicating a desire or suggestion that the true state of things be kept as confidential.
I informed the Baltic of the whole catastrophe about 10:30 in the morning after the wreck.
At 10:30.
About 10:30.
On Monday morning following the loss of the Titanic.
Yes, sir.
You communicated the facts to the Baltic.
Yes, sir.
Do you know how far out the Baltic was at that time? How far from you?
I could not say, sir, but she was steaming in the direction of the wreck.
She was steaming in the direction of the wreck.
Yes, sir.
But you had no communication with a coast station.
No, sir.
And can you recall what was said in the message at 10:30 Monday morning to the Baltic?
I told her the distress signal received earlier on or the previous night and told her that we had been to the wreck and picked up as many passengers as we could find in the small boats and were returning to New York.
Did you say anything in this message about Halifax?
No, sir.
Or at any other time?
No, sir. Yes, I believe I did mention something about Halifax, sir, simply because the captain was bound for Halifax first, but then he changed his mind and was bound for New York. I may have mentioned Halifax. I cannot quite remember whether I mentioned Halifax at first.
You say the captain was bound for Halifax.
Yes, sir.
How do you know?
I went and asked the captain, sir. 3 or 4 ships about wanted to know where we were bound for, and the captain said he was not decided. He thought he was bound for Halifax, but later on in the morning he changed his mind.
At what time?
I cannot remember the time.
About what time? Was it forenoon?
It may have been about noon.
Was it necessary to change his course in changing his mind?
Slightly, sir.
Did you, at any time on Monday, send a message to the Baltic or to any other office to the effect that all passengers had been saved and the Titanic was being towed to Halifax?
No, sir.
Or anything resembling that?
No, sir.
Then you did not in any way attempt to withhold the exact facts concerning the sinking of the Titanic?
No, sir.
Did any message reach you on the Carpathia on Monday night, or Tuesday, from any source indicating a rumor of that kind?
No, sir.
The only reference to Halifax was the reference made in your first message to the Baltic.
Yes, sir. I may have sent the same to the other ships. I cannot remember. There were 3 or 4 ships in the vicinity, the Virginian, the Californian, and the Baltic. I may have sent the same message to the 3, but I cannot be certain.
But you did not send out from the Carpathia any report that the passengers and crew of the Titanic were saved and that the ship, badly damaged, was being towed to Halifax?
No, sir.
Or anything of that nature?
No, sir.
And if I understand you correctly, you were not requested to do so?
No, sir.
By anyone?
No, sir.
Either operator or officer or any other person?
No, sir.
Did you pick up on the instrument any such statement from any other source?
No, sir.
Did you know that a statement of that kind was being printed?
No, sir.
You sent out no communication which was indefinite enough to be so construed?
No, sir.
You are very positive about that?
Yes, sir.
It would have been false, would it not?
Yes, sir.
And of your own knowledge, you knew that it would be false?
Yes, sir.
If the White Star Line sent the following telegram, dated New York, April 15th. J.A. Hughes, Huntington, West Virginia, Titanic proceeding to Halifax. Passengers will probably land there Wednesday. All safe, White Star Line. They did not obtain this information from you?
No, sir.
Nor to your knowledge from any other operator on our Carpathia?
No, sir.
Were you on duty on Monday?
Yes, sir.
How much of Monday?
All the day, sir.
All day?
Yes, sir.
What do you mean by day? Give the hours.
The whole of the time, sir.
Give the hour when you went on duty and when you left.
I do not remember when I went on, and I did not come off for a couple of days after I got on.
Were you off duty from early evening Sunday until Monday evening?
No, sir. I was never off.
Never off duty?
No, sir.
So you were at your instrument?
Yes, the whole time.
All of the time.
Yes, sir.
On Sunday night and Monday all day. And as I understand you yesterday, a Monday night all night.
Yes, sir.
And Tuesday all day.
Yes, sir.
And Tuesday night all night.
Tuesday night or Wednesday night. I cannot remember whether it was Tuesday night or Wednesday night. I got about 2 or 3 hours of sleep.
You fell off asleep.
Yes.
And do not know when you went to sleep.
No, sir.
You awoke at dawn.
Yes, sir.
On Wednesday morning.
Yes, sir.
I suppose you were exhausted.
Yes, sir.
And involuntarily lapsed into slumber,
Yes, sir.
sitting at your instrument.
Yes, sir.
When did Mr. Bride, the surviving wireless operator of the Titanic, relieve you?
I believe it was Wednesday afternoon and he was brought up.
Wednesday afternoon.
Yes, sir.
You slept in the early morning until dawn
Yes, sir.
of Wednesday
Yes, sir.
and got no relief until the afternoon of Wednesday.
I think it was the afternoon of Wednesday, sir. I do not remember the days at all being up all the time. I don't remember what days were. I know I only had about 10 hours sleep from the time we left the scene of the wreck until we arrived at New York.
You are positive, however, that you were in charge of the instrument Sunday night, all night.
Yes, sir.
Monday and Monday night, all night.
Yes, sir.
That was the day following this calamity.
Yes, sir.
Tuesday and Tuesday night.
Yes, sir. I believe it was Tuesday night when I fell off asleep and I had about 3 hours sleep.
That is what you have stated, Tuesday night. And you awakened at dawn on Wednesday morning.
Yes, sir.
When you awakened, did you find yourself at your instrument?
Yes, sir.
Fully dressed.
Yes, sir.
And you got no relief until Mr. Bride came to your relief during the afternoon of Wednesday, that same day.
No, sir.
About what time did Mr. Bride come to your relief?
It was late in the afternoon. I should say about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, sir.
And how long were you absent from your instrument?
After Bride came into the cabin.
Yes.
I was not absent at all, sir.
You were not absent at all.
Nope.
Were you lying down in your room adjoining your apparatus?
Yes, sir.
You were lying down in the room.
Not when Mr. Bride came. I kept the watch all night. The night that Bride was there, I was up the whole night.
You were up all of Wednesday night assisting Mr. Bride.
Yes, sir.
What I would like to know is how much rest you got on Wednesday or Wednesday afternoon.
I cannot remember, sir, what rest I had. I know I only had about 8 or 10 hours, I think, from the time we arrived at the wreck till the time we arrived at New York.
During that time, was Mr. Bride the instrument?
Yes, sir. We were both there the whole time.
But during the time you were getting the rest, did you leave him at the instrument?
Yes, sir.
But you did not leave the instrument yourself until Wednesday afternoon.
I did not leave the instrument on Wednesday afternoon.
Well, you got rest on Wednesday, you say?
I do not remember whether I did or not.
While Mr. Bride was at the instrument, did you feel your responsibility for the service?
Yes, sir.
You did not pass this responsibility over to him.
No, sir.
What did he do for you?
He carried on with the work, sir, while I was not there.
Were you at your instrument when the message from the Chester was received?
Yes, sir.
You took that message.
Yes, sir.
Did you reply to it?
Yes, sir.
In the manner you stated yesterday?
Yes, sir.
You did not feel any authority, you did not have any authority to designate Mr. Bride for service.
No, sir. His services were entirely voluntary, sir.
His services were voluntary.
Yes, sir.
What was his physical condition?
He could not walk. He could not stand, sir.
He could not walk and he could not stand.
No, sir.
From injuries?
From injuries, yes, sir. Injuries received at the time of the wreck.
At the time of the wreck?
Yes, sir.
What was his mental condition? Did he seem to be lucid?
Yes, sir. No, sir. He seemed to be all right.
How?
He seemed to be all right.
I say he seemed to be all right. Did he mentally?
Yes, sir.
And did he receive messages to your knowledge?
Yes, sir.
And answer them?
Yes, sir.
Do you know any that he sent or received?
It was Mr. Bride who sent the third-class names to the Chester, sir.
Any other message?
I have no record of it here, sir. The records are all in the Carpathia.
No other message that you can recollect?
No, sir. He did send some, sir, but I cannot remember when or what they were.
Did you know at the time?
Yes, sir.
And if he had sent any message, such as I have indicated, that the Titanic was being towed to Halifax and passengers were safe, you would have known it, would you not?
Yes, sir.
And you would not have permitted it?
No, sir.
He did not, in fact, send it.
No, sir.
Send such message.
No, sir.
Can you now tell just how long Mr. Bride was at the instrument?
He was on and off the instrument and took a watch occasionally, sir.
Took a watch occasionally.
Yes, sir.
Did you stand watch alone all of the time, with the exception of the short time you were overtaken by slumber and the time you were relieved by Mr. Bride, from Sunday evening until your arrival in New York?
Yes, sir.
And had the responsibility for the work of the wireless on the Carpathia?
Yes, sir.
Has anybody talked to you since you have been in New York that was aboard the boat with reference to any messages that were sent or received?
I heard about the message being put about the Titanic being bound for Halifax, sir.
Tell us what you were asked.
I was asked by somebody aboard, and I cannot remember who it was, whether I sent the message or not.
Were you asked by Mr. Ismay?
No, sir.
Were you asked by some officer of the Carpathia?
No, sir.
Were you asked by any of the crew?
No, sir.
Or by any of the passengers?
I believe it was after we arrived in New York I heard about it, sir.
After you arrived at the Cunard docks, you were asked that question.
Yes, sir.
Do you know who interrogated you?
No, sir, I do not. I cannot remember at all, sir. I was too busy at the time.
Would you know the man if you saw him?
I don't suppose I would, sir. I did not take any notice of him at the time.
Have you seen him since?
I do not know, sir.
How soon after you reached the Cunard dock were you asked that question?
I cannot say. I do not recollect anything concerning that question at all.
Was it immediately after you reached dock?
I cannot remember anything about it. Only remember being asked after we arrived in New York, sir.
What were you asked? Just state what was said to you and your reply.
I was asked if I had sent the message to shore to the effect the Titanic was being towed into Halifax, and of course, I said I had not.
That you had not?
No, sir.
Did you say anything more?
No, sir.
Did the person who addressed you say anything more?
No, sir. I believe it was a reporter. I cannot remember, sir. I believe it was a reporter.
You do not know who it was?
No, sir. I cannot remember at all.
Did you have any conversation with Mr. Bride about that matter?
No, sir. I did not. I never spoke to him about it.
Did he have any conversation with you about it?
No, sir.
I understood you to say yesterday that the wireless apparatus on the Carpathia was rather out of date.
Yes, sir.
And not in very good condition.
The set itself is in good condition for what it is, sir, but it is an old-fashioned type.
An old-fashioned type?
Yes.
Have you any means of knowing what distance you could accurately communicate with that apparatus?
About 250 miles, I should say, sir.
When you say this was an old type, you mean it was limited in its power?
Yes, sir.
What was the maximum wavelength that could be employed by that instrument?
I do not know the wavelength, but I was using the standard wavelength of all the ships in the Marine service.
You say the standard wavelength. Was that 600 meters?
Yes, sir.
And you could use 600 meters, could you?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that to be the standard wavelength that English ships, or ships under the flag of countries, or parties to the international treaty have prescribed?
Yes, sir.
You know that, do you?
Yes, sir.
How do you know it?
I know that there is a rule established by the International Convention to the effect that merchant ships are not permitted to use wavelengths other than 600 and 300 meters.
Merchant ships have the 600 maximum and 300 minimum.
Yes, sir.
Is that right, Mr. Marconi?
Yes, sir. That is right.
And you were able to meet these regulations with these instruments fairly satisfactorily?
Yes, sir. Most of the time I was not using an attuned set at all. It was a plain aerial, and emitting unattuned oscillations.
Just explain that.
There's no wavelength at all to what we call plain aerial, sir. Any ships within the radius of 250 miles or under would get it. It would not matter hardly what adjustment they were standing by on.
Is that reliable?
Yes, sir.
That is simply general transmission to offices within a limited radius.
Yes, sir.
I believe you said you were 21 years of age?
Yes, sir.
And that you have been an operator for about 4 or 5 years?
About 3 years.
About 3 years.
About 3 years.
And that your wages were £4 10 shillings?
Yes, sir, per month.
And board?
Yes, sir.
And that your room was provided for you in your office?
Yes, sir.
I am not quite satisfied to leave your statement yesterday to the effect that no regular office hours are prescribed by your regulations.
No, sir. The operator uses his own discretion, but he is responsible if anything should go wrong at all.
What do you do with your time when you are away from the instrument? How do you pass your time? Where do you pass it? You cannot find much society at the place where your office is located on the boat.
No, sir.
Where do you go? What do you do? Mingle with the crew?
I mingle with the crew or go on deck.
Where?
On deck or in their rooms.
On deck or in their rooms?
Yes, sir.
And the number of times you shall go to your office and your instrument is entirely discretionary with you.
Yes, sir. The Marconi Company issues charts showing us when the ships come along, sir.
Then when you caught this message from the Titanic, this distress message, you caught it not because you were there by any regulation of your company at that particular time?
No, sir.
But rather accidentally.
Yes, sir.
I believe you said you had the telephone on your ear when you started to disrobe and get ready to retire for the night.
Yes, sir.
You kept this telephone on your ear that you might not miss anything just before getting into bed.
I had just previously called the Parisian. I was waiting for a reply to see if there was one coming.
If that reply from the Parisian had been received, that would have ended your work for the night, would it?
Yes, sir. I should have replied again. I should have finished for the night.
That was a commercial communication.
Yes, sir. It would have been if I had ever caught the Parisian, but I did not catch him. Apparently, he had gone to bed.
Apparently, the operator on the Parisian had gone to bed.
Yes, sir.
You assumed he had gone to bed.
Yes, sir.
What was the hour?
The hour was about 11 o'clock, sir, New York time.
You kept the telephone on your ear that you might get a reply from the Parisian, if possible, before you retired.
Yes, sir.
Now, while you had this telephone apparatus on your head and were preparing for bed, you caught this communication from the Titanic.
Not just then, sir. It was about 5 minutes afterwards.
About 5 minutes?
Afterwards.
After you had attempted to get a reply from the Parisian?
Yes, sir.
If you had not had this telephone arrangement on your head and had been preparing for bed, was there anything on that instrument that would have alarmed you or signaled you to the board?
No, sir. Nothing whatever.
Nothing whatever?
No, sir.
So that the communication from the Titanic reached you by the merest accident?
Yes, sir.
Providentially?
Yes, sir.
And the first message, just repeat it to the reporter.
The first message was saying, "Come at once. It is a CQD, old man. That is a distress call." Then he sent his position.
What was this old man? What did that mean?
It is simply a complimentary remark that is passed in wireless telegraph service.
That was a pretty serious time for complimentary remarks, was it not? Did you transmit it to the captain in the form in which it came?
No, sir. There was no necessity to put that on, sir.
You struck off, old man.
Yes, sir, but I reported it verbally.
Was that old man intended for you?
For me, sir.
You appropriated those 2 words and took the balance of it to the captain.
Yes, sir.
From the minute you were in communication with the Titanic until the last message came, about between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning.
No, sir. It was 11:55 New York time when I received the last message from the Titanic.
11:55.
Yes.
That was the message which said that the boiler room was filling with water?
Yes, sir.
Come or anything?
He said, come as quickly as possible. He said, she's taking water and it is up to the boilers.
You took that message to the captain,
Yes, sir.
and the captain replied.
Yes, sir.
In order to have this, I am going to run the risk of repetition. We should like to have you give the captain's reply.
The captain told me to go and tell the Titanic he was making towards the position given as quickly as possible, that he had a double watch in the engine room and she was making a good 15 and perhaps 16 knots. He told me to tell her to get the boats ready as we got ours already.
The lifeboat.
Yes, sir.
Did you send any other message after that?
Yes, sir. I repeated the message many times, sir.
You repeated the message many times,
Yes.
but you got no answer.
I got no answer, sir.
And never did receive an answer to that last message?
Sir?
Did you get an answer to the last message from any other ship
No, sir.
or other office?
No, sir.
I think that is all. You may step aside. I will ask Mr. Bride to take the stand.
The witness was sworn by the chairman.
What is your full name?
Harold S. Bride,
Where do you reside?
London.
London, England.
Yes, sir.
What is your age?
22.
What is your occupation?
Wireless telegraph operator.
How long have you been engaged in that business?
Since the beginning of last July, sir.
What service have you seen since then?
I have been across to America, here, 3 times, and down to Brazil 3 times.
On what boats?
I went to Philadelphia on the Haverford, twice to New York on the Lusitania, once to Brazil on the Longfranc, and twice to Brazil on the Anselm.
In that service, were you chief operator?
On the Lusitania, I was the second man. On the other boats, I was in charge, the only operator.
Had you any previous experience as an operator?
No, none at all.
Had you ever been employed by the Post Office Department of England?
No, I had been to a training college to learn wireless.
What college?
The British School of Telegraphy, Clapham Road.
Did you receive a diploma from there?
I have a government certificate.
How long were you there?
8 months.
In whose employ were you on the 10th day of April?
The 10th day of April of this year.
Yes.
The Marconi companies, sir.
The Marconi companies.
Yes, sir.
In what capacity?
Second operator on the Titanic.
What wage did you receive?
£4 a month.
And board?
Yes, sir. And board.
You were second operator.
Yes, sir.
Who was your chief?
Mr. Phillips.
An older man than you?
Yes, sir.
A more experienced man?
Yes, sir.
How old would you say Mr. Phillips was?
He was around 24.
And he had had a larger experience.
Larger experience.
Do you know what wage he received?
No, sir.
What were your duties as assistant operator?
To take a watch with Mr. Phillips and to relieve Mr. Phillips.
How?
To keep a watch of 6 hours, sir.
To keep a watch of 6 hours. And during that time, was there someone constantly at the instrument?
Constantly at the instrument, yes, sir.
Upon what vessel were you employed?
The Titanic.
The Titanic.
Yes, sir.
Were you acquainted with any of the officers or crew of the Titanic when you entered service on the boat?
No, sir.
Had you sailed with any of them before?
No, sir.
Were you acquainted with Mr. Phillips?
Not until I saw him in Belfast.
Was he in Belfast?
Yes, sir.
Once or oftener?
I went up to Belfast to join the Titanic.
Did you join her in Belfast?
Yes, sir.
Were you on board the Titanic when she made the trial tests?
Yes, sir.
Did you take any interest in the trial tests?
We were kept rather busy, sir.
At the instrument?
Yes, sir.
Do you call it the key? No, you do not call it the key. What do you call the instrument?
The apparatus.
And you were engaged at this instrument, apparatus, during these trial tests?
Yes, sir.
Were you sending communications at that time?
We were testing the apparatus, sir. It had just left the hands of the engineers. We were holding tests with Liverpool and Malham Head wireless stations.
Can you say of your own knowledge how long a time was devoted to these trial tests?
The whole of Monday, as far as I know, sir. Monday we left Belfast.
You do not know of your own knowledge when the trial tests ceased, I suppose.
No, sir.
Did you leave the ship at all after boarding at Belfast?
I left the ship at Southampton, sir.
Temporarily.
Temporarily, yes, sir.
And returned to the ship.
I returned to the ship before sailing, sir. The day before.
The day before sailing,
Yes, sir.
which would have been the 9th of April.
Yes, sir.
At what hour?
Well, we got on board rather late. It was 11:30 in the evening.
At what time was she to sail?
Midday the next day, sir.
Hmm. Now, I wish you would describe, as near as you can, the wireless apparatus with which the Titanic was equipped.
It was a 5 kilowatt discharger field fitted with magnetic detector and valve and receiver and emergency gears.
Would you call it a thoroughly up-to-date apparatus?
Yes, sir. It was the only set afloat with the Marconi Company with the discharger.
And your tests of this apparatus worked out satisfactorily?
Very satisfactorily, sir.
How far could you communicate with that apparatus?
During the daytime, we reckoned to be able to do 400 miles.
That is a pretty broad statement.
When you say no limits, sir, we're talking about freak messages which you can get. We were lying off Linton when we came around Belfast, when we exchanged the last message with Tenerife and Port Said.
Almost any apparatus can get a freak message if it comes within the radius of that instrument.
We had a special sending apparatus which doubled our range.
What wavelength could you employ with that apparatus?
600 and 300 meters.
That is the international regulation.
Regulation, yes, sir.
And the regulation prescribed by the Marconi Company.
Yes, sir.
Did you have occasion to use this wireless frequently after leaving Southampton?
Very frequently, yes, sir.
For what purpose?
Commercial traffic, sir.
With English coast stations?
With English coast stations and with other ships.
And ships at sea?
Yes, sir.
I wish you would let us know, if you can, how busy you were kept at that work.
From leaving Southampton to the time we had finished with Cape Race, we had got through about 250 telegrams. That was the evening we struck. When we had finished with Cape Race, we had transmitted 250 telegrams just about since leaving Southampton.
Up to the time you struck, up to the time of the occurrence of this impact.
Yes, sir.
Was the weather favorable for that kind of work?
Very favorable, sir.
Were there any officers of the White Star Line aboard the Titanic?
The Titanic was commanded by White Star officers.
I understand, but any general officers?
Any what, sir?
Any general officers of the White Star Line?
We had heard that Mr. Ismay was on board, but beyond that, I do not know anything.
Where did you hear that?
Mr. Phillips told me, sir.
Your chief told you.
Yes, sir.
Did he tell you who Mr. Ismay was?
I knew from the name who he was.
You knew who he was.
Yes, sir.
Had you ever seen him?
Not before, sir.
Did you see him during the voyage?
No, I do not think I did, sir.
At no time.
No, I do not think so.
Did he send or receive messages through you during the voyage?
I believe there were some transmitted for him, sir.
Official messages?
They were drank with us as official messages.
Did they have to do with the direction or speed of the ship?
Coming around from Belfast, there were messages transmitted from Mr. Ismay regarding the speed of the ship.
He was not then aboard. Was he aboard the ship from Belfast to Southampton?
I believe so.
He was.
Yes, sir.
That was on the trial trip.
Coming around from Belfast to Southampton, sir.
That is, the trial tests were made in what water?
Belfast Lough.
And then the ship was put underway for Southampton.
Yes.
And while she was underway, these messages from Mr. Ismay were sent.
Yes, sir.
And received? Did you get any reply?
I could not tell you, sir.
To whom were they sent? Do you remember?
They were sent to the White Star officers at Liverpool and Southampton.
Liverpool or London?
Liverpool and Southampton.
Can you recall what was contained in the messages?
No, sir.
Generally, do you know what they said?
Generally, sir, that the trials of the speed of the ship were very favorable.
Were there any other messages for Mr. Ismay at that time?
I cannot recollect, sir.
Did you see him aboard the Titanic after leaving Southampton?
No, sir.
Did you send or receive any messages from or for him after leaving Southampton?
I could not tell you. We had too many to remember them all.
If you received a message for the managing director of the company, you might remember it.
No, I cannot.
You cannot say.
No, sir.
Did he come to the wireless office during that journey?
Not to my knowledge.
From Southampton to the time of the collision?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Or after the collision?
No, sir.
Did he send any word to you between Southampton and the time of the collision?
Not to my knowledge.
Or after the collision?
No, sir.
Do you know whether he sent any messages or received any messages while Mr. Phillips was at the apparatus?
I cannot say, sir.
Did you hear whether he did or not?
No, sir.
Or whether he called upon Mr. Phillips or sent word to him after the collision?
No, sir. He did not, sir, after the collision.
Or on Sunday at all?
I could not say, sir. We had a lot of traffic on Sunday.
You cannot recall whether Mr. Ismay sent or received any message on Sunday?
No, sir.
Can you recall whether the captain of the ship received any messages on Saturday or Sunday from any White Star official regarding the movement, direction, or speed of the ship?
No, sir, he did not.
How do you know he did not?
Because I should have delivered it. I saw the captain's messages. I was delivering them for Mr. Phillips.
You were not on duty all of the time during those 2 days.
No, sir.
And during the time that Phillips was on duty, would you know what he received?
I should know eventually, sir.
Eventually.
When I made up my account.
Did you ever make up the accounts?
Not for Sunday, sir.
Not for Sunday.
No, sir.
Or for Saturday.
Saturday's accounts were made up, yes, sir.
Did you make them up?
Yes, sir.
And you are ready to testify that the captain received no message from any source over the wireless, which in any manner changed the course of the ship, its direction, or its speed?
Yes, sir.
Or any other officer of the ship?
Yes, sir.
Would the same answer apply to all?
And the same answer, yes, sir.
Did Mr. Phillips say to you at any time that such a message had been received?
No, sir, he did not.
Did the captain or any other officer of the Titanic send any message to the White Star officers respecting the direction, the speed, or the conditions of the weather, the sea, or its proximity to the Great Banks?
Communication had been established with the Baltic on Sunday afternoon, and compliments were exchanged between the two commanders and the state of the weather.
What else? Anything besides the state of the weather?
Not to my knowledge.
Were you on duty when the wireless message was received from the America regarding the proximity of icebergs in that longitude?
I have no knowledge of a wireless message received from the America regarding any iceberg. There may have been received by Mr. Phillips, but I did not see one myself.
Have you heard that such a message was received?
No, sir.
Did Mr. Phillips say that such a message had been received?
No, sir.
Did you ever talk with the captain about such a message?
There was a message delivered to the captain in the afternoon, sir. Late in the afternoon regarding...
Of Sunday?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Regarding the ice field.
From whom?
From the Californian, sir.
At what hour Sunday?
It may not have been the Californian, but I can give you the call signal of the ship. It is MWL. You can ascertain that later.
Go ahead.
I received that message myself and delivered it to the captain. It stated that there were 3 large icebergs that the ship had just passed, and it gave their position.
What was the hour of the day?
Late in the afternoon, but I cannot say the hour of the day.
Dusk?
It was an unofficial message.
From whom was it?
From the ship.
The Californian,
The ship with that call signal, MWL.
which was the code signal.
The seed signal of the ship.
Are you familiar with code signals?
I know a good few of them.
Do you know what that means?
That particular call signal means a certain ship.
Yes, I want to know the name of that ship.
It is the Californian. MWL is the signal of the Californian.
What is your name?
I am the engineer of the Marconi Company.
What is your name?
Samus.
What is your first name?
Frederick.
Who are you?
I am the engineer of the American Company.
Of the American Marconi Company.
Yes, sir.
And you say this code signal,
It is the signal of the Californian.
was it from the Californian?
Yes, sir.
That is her signal.
Yes, sir.
That is a recognized signal
Yes, sir.
among mariners or in the management of the wireless.
Amongst the operators, each ship has its own call, and that is a distinctive call for each one.
The Californian is equipped with Marconi,
Yes, sir.
and this is her registered signal.
Yes, sir. Her call.
Now, I would like to know just what that message said.
In the first place, the Californian had called me, sir, with an ice report. I was rather busy just for the minute, and I did not take it. She did not call again. She transmitted the ice report to the Baltic, and as she was transmitting it to the Baltic, I took it down. I took it to the captain, but it was not official because it was not intended for me afterwards.
Was the attempt made first upon you?
First on me, sir, yes.
And being unable to get you, they tried to get the Baltic.
It was about half an hour after that they transmitted it to the Baltic.
Why were they unable to get you?
I was doing some writing at the time, sir.
You mean you were taking some messages?
No, sir, I was writing some accounts.
You were writing some accounts.
Yes, sir.
Where?
On the operating table.
On the operating table.
Yes, sir.
Did you have this instrument off your head at the time?
No, sir.
Well, were you aware the Californian was trying to get you?
Yes, sir.
You continued your work on the accounts, if I understand you correctly,
Yes, sir.
and did not respond to the Californian's call
No, sir.
for 30 minutes.
I do not think it was quite 30 minutes.
How long a time was it?
It may have been. It would have been somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. I cannot say definitely.
Just what hour was it?
Late in the afternoon.
Of Sunday?
Yes, sir. I should say it was about 5 o'clock.
About 6 hours before that calamity occurred.
Yes, sir.
Did your work continue for about 20 or 30 minutes on the accounts?
Yes, sir.
After you had finished, what did you do?
I still remained on watch until dinner time.
Had you had any other wireless communications regarding the proximity of icebergs?
No, sir.
This information you got from the Californian was the first information,
Yes, sir.
and that you received about 5:30 the afternoon of Sunday,
I should say it was nearer 5 o'clock, sir.
when you took it.
Yes, sir.
Then, when the first call was made, it must have been about 4:30,
Yes.
the ship being under steam and moving all the time.
Yes, sir.
When you got this call from the Californian, which was intended for the Baltic, what did you do?
I simply waited until she informed the Baltic. It was a nice report. Then I knew it would have been the same one she had for me, so I took it down.
And delivered it.
Yes, sir. I acknowledged it to the Californian before I delivered it.
You acknowledged it.
I acknowledged receipt of it.
How much time elapsed while you were waiting to confirm this report through the Baltic?
I did not confirm it through the Baltic. I confirmed it direct to the Californian.
Confirmed it with the Californian
Yes, sir.
in your acknowledgement.
Yes, sir.
How much time elapsed?
I should say about 4 minutes.
What did you say in confirming this report to the Californian?
I gave the usual acknowledgement of receipt, RD, the Marconi signal.
RD indicates received.
Yes, sir.
And you said nothing more.
Nothing more.
But you are certain the Californian knew that you had this message.
Yes, sir.
Did they respond directly?
They simply gave the usual finishing signal, TIS MLW.
After you had put the RD on,
Yes, sir.
so that you knew they were aware of the fact that you had received the message.
Yes, sir.
Now, once more, I would like to have you tell the exact language of that message.
It stated the Californian had passed 3 large icebergs and gave their latitude and longitude.
That they had passed 3 large icebergs
Yes, sir.
and gave their latitude and longitude.
Yes, that she had passed very close to them.
Do you recollect what the latitude and longitude were?
No, sir. Indeed, I do not.
Did you make a record of this communication?
No, sir. I made it on a slip of paper and handed it to the bridge.
Intending to make a permanent record of it?
No, sir.
Are you not obliged to make a record of it?
No, sir.
The reason you made no record of this message was because it was not official.
It was not official, sir. If we kept a record of all these messages, we should never be able to get through our work.
If it had been official, you would have preserved it
I should have preserved it.
and made permanent record of it.
Yes, sir.
You took that message to the captain.
The officer on the bridge.
Who was the officer on the bridge?
I could not say, sir. I do not know the officers, sir.
Was it Mr. Lightoller?
I could not tell you.
You do not know whether it was the first or second officer?
I did not know any of the officers there. I did not know what watches they were keeping.
You did not know what watches they were keeping.
No, sir.
You took it to the officer on the bridge.
Yes, on the bridge.
At what hour?
A little after 5, sir.
A little after 5.
Yes.
Was that Officer Murdoch?
I could not tell you, sir.
Do you know Mr. Murdoch?
No, sir. I know the officers by sight, but I do not know their names.
Mr. Murdoch was the first officer. He was in charge of the lookout at the time. Can you verify that in any way?
No, sir.
Did you communicate this message to the captain?
No, sir. I gave it to the officer on watch, sir.
I just wanted to know whether you communicated it to the captain yourself.
No, sir.
You communicated it to the officer in charge of the watch, who had charge of the ship at the time.
Yes, sir.
Did you receive any other communications regarding icebergs
No, sir.
from any ship that afternoon or evening?
No, sir.
Did Mr. Phillips receive a message from the America?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
You did not receive one from the America.
No, sir.
You are very certain about that.
No, yes, sir.
Are you also very certain that the only message you received regarding icebergs was received from the Californian?
Personally, yes, sir. As to what Mr. Phillips received, I cannot say.
No, I'm not asking you that. Now, once more, did Mr. Phillips at any time say to you that a message had been received from any other ship on that subject?
No, sir.
Who was on duty at the wireless station from 6 o'clock Sunday evening until the collision or impact?
I was on duty for half an hour, sir, while Mr. Phillips went and had his dinner.
At what hour?
From 7 o'clock until past.
Where were you after that, up to the time of the collision?
At the time of the collision,
Up to the time of the collision.
I was in bed.
You had retired.
Yes, sir.
In a room adjacent to the apparatus.
Yes, sir.
Did you and Mr. Phillips both occupy that room?
Yes, sir.
How far was it from the apparatus?
Just next door to it.
With a door between.
There was a door between, yes, sir.
Could you enter immediately from the apparatus or operating room to the bedroom?
Yes, sir.
You retired at what time?
It was just about 8 o'clock.
Were you in bed when the collision occurred?
Yes, sir.
Were you asleep?
Yes, sir.
Were you awakened by it?
No, sir.
How were you awakened?
I woke up of my own accord.
No one aroused you after the impact.
No, sir.
How long did you lie in bed after the collision?
I could not tell you, sir.
Did Mr. Phillips not arouse you
No, sir.
or attempt to do so?
No, sir.
Do you know what time you rose from your bed?
It must have been about a quarter to 12, sir. About 5 minutes to 12 ship's time.
5 minutes to 12 ship's time.
Yes, sir.
What time did the collision occur?
I could not say, sir.
You remained in bed until 12:05.
I think it was this side of 12, sir. It was about 5 minutes to 12.
Then you must have been aroused somewhat by this impact.
No, I had promised to relieve Mr. Phillips earlier than usual, you see.
Earlier than usual that night.
Yes.
And you awakened yourself.
Yes.
Did you arise immediately?
Yes, sir.
And dress yourself?
I went out to speak to him before I dressed. I only had pajamas on.
Before you put your clothes on?
Yes, sir.
But what did you say to him?
I asked him how he was getting on.
What did he say?
He had a big batch of telegrams from Cape Race that he had just finished.
He told you that?
Yes.
Had he finished his work?
Yes.
This was after the collision.
After the collision.
Did you remain in the operating room?
I got dressed first.
You returned to the bedroom and got dressed.
Yes, sir.
During that time, did Mr. Phillips tell you that the boat had been injured?
He told me that he thought she had got damaged in some way and that he expected that we should have to go back to Harlan and Wolf's.
Those are the builders at Belfast.
Yes.
What did you do then?
I took over the watch from him.
You took the watch from him.
Yes, sir.
Where did he go?
He was going to retire, sir.
Did he retire?
He got inside of the other room when the captain came in there.
The captain came in.
Yes, sir.
Personally?
Yes, sir.
Into the operating room?
Yes, sir.
What did the captain say?
He told us that we had better get assistance.
Can you tell us in his language?
That is exactly what he said. He said, you had better get assistance. When Mr. Phillips heard him, he came out and asked him if he wanted to use a distress call. He said yes at once.
Who sent this call?
Mr. Phillips.
He responded to the captain's desire.
Yes, sir.
And you turned the apparatus over to him.
Yes, sir.
Was the message sent immediately?
Yes, sir.
Do you know what the message was?
Yes.
Please state it.
CQD about half a dozen times. MGY half a dozen times.
Will you kindly explain the meaning of these letters or that code?
CQD is a recognized distress call. MGY is the code call of the Titanic.
Is CQD in itself composed of the first letters of 3 words or merely a code?
Merely a code call, sir.
But one recognized by operators as important, as a distress signal.
Yes, sir.
How long after that call was sent out was it before you got a reply?
As far as I know, immediately, sir.
Within 2 or 3 minutes.
You see, I could read what Mr. Phillips was sending, but I could not get the answers because he had the telephones.
You knew what he had sent, but you did not know what he received in reply.
No, sir.
Right at this point, I'm going to ask Mr. Marconi if he will tell us what CQD means, literally.
It is a conventional signal.
You mean it is in accordance with the International Convention?
No, it is not. It is a conventional signal which was introduced originally by my company to express a state of danger or peril of a ship that sends it.
It is an arbitrary signal.
It is arbitrary, but it is conventional. Everyone understands it. CQ means all stations. Does it not, Mr. Bride?
Yes, sir.
CQ is the call for all stations. If you call CQ on a ship, it means all other stations stand at attention and reply. I did not make the signal originally. I presume the object was to indicate in a certain way to all stations the danger or peril that exists.
Or distress.
Or distress, yes. I should add that the international danger signal introduced or decided on by the Berlin Convention is SOS.
What does that mean?
I do not know what it means. It denotes danger or distress. I believe that was sent too from the Titanic, but of course Mr. Bride will tell you if it is the fact.
What is the silent signal?
I do not know it personally.
Under the International Convention, I mean.
I do not know it.
It is DDD.
DDD.
That is the silent signal.
Yes, sir. That means shut up.
All other stations must cease.
All other stations must cease.
But the danger signal, CQD, is the recognized signal for a ship in distress.
Yes.
You received a reply within 3 or 4 minutes, but you only know that from what...
What Mr. Phillips told me.
Just what did he tell you?
He told me to go to the captain and report the Frankfurt.
What do you mean by the Frankfurt?
He was in communication with the Frankfurt, sir. He had sent the commuter the Frankfurt, our position.
Was the Frankfurt the first ship that picked up the CQD?
Yes, sir.
And you delivered that message to the captain?
Yes, sir.
Personally?
Yes, sir.
Where was he at the time?
He was on the boat deck, sir.
On the boat deck?
Yes, sir.
Not on the bridge?
No, sir.
The boat deck being the sun deck, upper deck?
Being the decks where the boats are.
Where the lifeboats are?
Yes, sir.
What did he say in reply when you handed him this message?
He wanted to know where she was, sir.
Her latitude?
And longitude, sir. I told him we would get that as soon as we could.
What did you do then?
I went back to the cabin with Mr. Phillips.
What did you tell him?
I told him I had reported to the captain.
And the captain wished that the position of the boat should be ascertained.
Mr. Phillips was waiting for the position of the boat then, sir.
What was the next message received by Mr. Phillips?
A reply from the Carpathia.
A reply to the CQD call.
Yes, sir.
From the Carpathia.
Yes, sir.
Did the Carpathia give her location?
Yes, sir, after she had obtained it from the bridge.
What did the Carpathia message say?
She sent her latitude and longitude and told him she was coming along as quickly as possible. She turned around and was steaming at full speed, or words to that effect.
That she had reversed her course?
Yes, sir.
And was steaming at full speed toward the Titanic?
Yes, sir.
What was done with this message?
It was taken to the captain, sir. I took it to the captain.
Where did you find him then?
He was in the wheelhouse.
What?
In the wheelhouse upon the bridge.
In the pilot house?
The wheelhouse.
Wheelhouse?
Yes, sir.
On the bridge?
Yes, sir.
He could enter the wheelhouse from the bridge?
Yes, sir.
What did the captain say when you delivered that message?
He came back with me to the cabin, sir.
He came back with you to the cabin?
Yes, sir.
And what took place?
He asked Mr. Phillips what other ships he was in communication with, sir.
He asked Mr. Phillips what other ships he was in communication with?
Yes, sir.
And what was said?
He interrupted Mr. Phillips when Mr. Phillips was establishing communication with the Olympic. So he was told that the Olympic was there.
Then what took place, Mr. Bride?
Why, he worked out the difference between the Carpathia's position and ours, sir.
Who did?
The captain.
The captain worked out the difference.
He roughly estimated it.
Worked out the difference between the Carpathia's position and that of the Olympic?
No, the Titanic.
Between the Carpathia's position and that of the Titanic?
Yes, sir.
And then what occurred?
He went out to the cabin then, sir, and we still continued to exchange.
He went out to the cabin?
Yes, sir.
And the operator continued what?
To exchange messages, sir.
To exchange messages?
Yes, sir.
What was the next message, so far as you can recollect?
Well, after the Olympics, sir, we did not get any replies, and I asked Mr. Phillips outside. Well, he went outside to see how they were getting on, and I took the phones.
I understand from you that the first response to the CQD call of distress was from the Frankfurt.
Yes, sir.
What line of boats?
German line, as far as I can remember, sir.
The North German Lloyd.
Did you receive any other communication from the Frankfurt?
Not then, sir. We had transmitted to the Frankfurt our position, but we received nothing from him in return.
You transmitted to the Frankfurt your position in the sea?
Yes, sir.
And never received any further acknowledgement?
He told us to stand by, sir. That means to wait.
The Frankfurt told you to stand by?
Yes, sir.
Does that mean I am coming?
It means wait. He is coming back again.
Where was the Frankfurt headed for?
I believe she was bound east, sir, but I cannot say for certain.
Had you been in communication with the Frankfurt during that day or the preceding day?
I cannot say, sir, as to that.
What is your best recollection about it?
I cannot say, sir. We were in communication with several ships during the afternoon and evening.
Is it impossible for you to recall whether you had any communication from the Frankfurt or sent any to her at any time during the voyage from Southampton to the place of this collision?
I do not think there was any communication established with the Frankfurt before we sent the distress signal, sir.
Did you pick up any message from the Frankfurt intended for any other operator?
No, sir.
Do you know what the Frankfurt's position was when she received the CQD call?
And that was what we were waiting for, sir.
Did you ever ascertain?
No, sir.
Did anyone say in your hearing that they thought the Frankfurt was in closer proximity to the Titanic than any other ship?
Yes, sir. Mr. Phillips told me, sir.
Who said that?
Mr. Phillips told me that. Judging by the strength of the signals received from the two ships, the Frankfurt was nearer.
Did Mr. Phillips tell you that he was trying to establish such communication with the Frankfurt as would bring that ship to your relief?
Well, Mr. Phillips was under the impression that when the Frankfurt had heard the CQD and got our position, he would immediately make it known to his commander and take further steps. Apparently, he did not.
Did the captain of the Titanic make any personal reference to that matter to you, or within your hearing, or to Mr. Phillips?
No, sir. He asked us where the Frankfurt was, but we told him we could not tell him.
But from the force of the current, Mr. Phillips gathered the Frankfurt was the nearer ship.
Yes, sir.
And the fact that it was first to respond was rather confirmatory of that.
No, sir, it would not be.
It would not be.
No, sir.
Did any officer on the Titanic at any time express the hope that the Frankfurt would come first to their relief?
No, sir.
Did you have any other communication with the Frankfurt after that ship responded to the distress call?
Yes, sir.
What was it?
He called us up at a considerably long period afterwards and asked us what was the matter.
How long after?
I should say it would be considerably over 20 minutes afterwards.
20 minutes after the message giving your position, the position of the Titanic,
And the CQD.
and the CQD distress call, you got another message from the Frankfurt saying, "What is the matter?"
Yes, sir.
Did they say anything else?
He merely inquired, sir, as to what the matter was with us.
To that message, what did you say?
I think Mr. Phillips responded rather hurriedly.
What did he say? I would like to know.
Well, he told him to the effect that he was a bit of a fool.
Just give it in his language.
Well, he told him he was a fool, sir.
Is that all?
Yes, sir.
Did he preface that word with anything more severe?
No, sir.
Did Mr. Phillips then tell him what was the matter?
No, sir.
Did he have any further communication with the Frankfurt?
No, sir. He told him to stand by, sir. Finish.
In the interim, you had got into communication with the Carpathia
And the Olympic.
and the Olympic,
Yes, sir.
both of whom assured you they were coming
Yes, sir.
to your relief.
Yes, sir.
To what line does the Olympic belong?
White Star, sir.
And the Carpathia belongs to the Cunard line.
The Cunard, yes, sir.
Did you ever learn the position of the Frankfurt
No, sir.
after she had first responded to your call?
No, sir.
Did Mr. Phillips ask for it?
Yes, sir.
How often?
When she first answered our CQD, he said, "Go and get your position." The Frankfurt replied, "Stand by."
Did the Frankfurt at that time know your position?
Yes, sir.
What was your interpretation of stand by in that connection?
To wait for his position and what he was going to do about the matter.
Did you ever get the position of the Frankfurt?
No, sir.
Did Mr. Phillips?
No, sir.
Did you and Mr. Phillips talk about it?
Yes, sir.
What did you say to one another about it?
We expressed our opinions of the operator on the Frankfurt.
Was it critical
Yes, sir.
and uncomplimentary?
Very.
Was it based upon any knowledge or suspicion that the operator was personally derelict in his duty?
Yes, sir.
Was it based upon any suspicion that the Frankfurt had not responded to this distress call as that ship should have done?
Yes, sir.
Was it a matter of deep regret between you and Mr. Phillips?
Well, it was at a time when the Frankfurt asked us what the matter was with us, because we realized then that we realized what had happened to the ship.
But you realized at that time that all the lives on that ship depended upon getting relief from some other vessel.
At the time the Frankfurt asked us what was the matter with us, yes, sir.
After you told him that he was a fool, did you tell him the ship was going down?
No, sir. We told him to stand by, sir, to keep out of it.
Keep out of what?
Not to interfere with his instruments, sir, because we were in communication with the Carpathia, and we knew the Carpathia was the best thing doing.
Did you tell that to the operator of the Frankfurt?
No, sir.
When you said keep out of it, could that be interpreted as in any way changing the first distress call?
Merely told him not to interfere with our communications.
He had not responded as you felt he ought to respond.
Yes, sir.
He had not indicated that they were coming.
No, sir.
He had impressed you with a lack of appreciation for your situation. Stop me if I am not interpreting you correctly. I am summarizing what you have said. Am I correct about that?
It struck me so that he did not seem to be able to realize the position we were in.
And you are quite sure you gave him all the information necessary?
We made it very clear to him.
You mean in referring to the condition you were in? You referred to the sinking of the Titanic?
If you call CKD and give your position, then there is no necessity for another ship to inquire further into the matter if he is coming to your assistance, because you could not call the CKD unless you were in need of assistance.
Now, CQD was the strongest language you could use under your wireless regulations to appraise any station that you needed help immediately. Is that right?
Any operator hearing a CQD giving the ship's position when on the job would immediately, without inquiring further into the matter, go to his captain and inform his captain. It would be a waste of time asking anything about it. The less time spent in talking, the more time can be spent in getting to the ship. We could not send anything more than a CQD.
After you told this operator he was a fool, and 20 minutes had gone by, did you tell him your ship was sinking?
No, sir.
Did you give him any additional information?
No, sir. He ought not to have wanted any in the first place.
Upon the information you did give him, are you ready to say whether the ship responded or not?
There ought not to have been any doubt about the information we gave him at all, sir. He ought to have known what to do with it immediately.
So far as you know, the Frankfurt did not respond.
No, sir.
Will you tell us what confirmation you have that the operator of the Frankfurt received your CQD distress call correctly?
Mr. Phillips had the telephones on at the time, sir. He called CQD. The Frankfurt answered. He gave the Frankfurt our position. He said, "Come at once." The Frankfurt said, "Stand by." We waited, and that is the last we heard of the Frankfurt until he said, "What is the matter with you?" A considerable period afterwards.
After he said, "What was the matter with you?" Then what was there?
We told him he was a fool, sir.
Was that the last thing you said to him?
To the Frankfurt, yes, sir.
You recall that you said later to him to keep out, not to interfere with your insulation or...
We told him to keep out and not interfere with our communication.
Was that all in one message?
That was all in one message.
You are a fool, keep out, do not interfere with our communication.
Yes, sir.
That was all in one message.
Yes, sir.
And that was the last thing you said to the Frankfurt.
Yes, sir.
Now, did you see the Frankfurt in the vicinity of the wreck of the Titanic? Or after you were taken on board the Carpathia?
The only ship I saw, sir, was the Carpathia.
Do you know whether the Carpathia had any communication of any kind from the Frankfurt?
No, sir, I cannot say.
You could not say?
No, sir.
While you were at the quay, or the apparatus, no message was received from the Frankfurt?
No, sir.
I think right here, I would like to ask Mr. Cottam one or two questions. Did you receive any messages from the Frankfurt?
No, sir. None whatsoever.
At no time?
No, sir.
Do you know of any being sent from the Carpathia to the Frankfurt?
No, sir.
You did not pick up any stray messages?
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Bragg, do you know whether the operator on the Frankfurt understood the English language?
There was no necessity for him to understand the English language, sir.
Because this call
Was an international call.
and CQD means the same in the German language and the French language and the English language,
Yes, sir.
and is the international code signal of distress
Yes, sir.
under the Berlin Convention,
I could not say, sir.
under the regulations of the Marconi Company.
It is recognized by all ships operators as being a signal of distress.
Mr. Bragg, I want this record to be as complete as possible, and I desire to know why, after a message was received from the Frankfurt asking what is the matter, you did not reply, we are sinking and the lives of our passenger and crew are in danger.
You see, it takes a certain amount of time to transmit that information, sir. If the man had understood properly, as he ought to have, CQD would have been sufficient, sir. CQD is the whole thing in a nutshell, you see.
Yes, but it did not seem to move him.
Well, he did not know his business, that is all, sir.
But in such an emergency, do you not think a more detailed statement might have been sent? Take, for instance, the message from the Titanic to the Carpathia, that the boiler rooms were filling with water and the ship sinking. That could have been sent with perfect propriety to a boat that was in proximity, could it not?
No, sir, I do not think it could have been under the circumstances.
Do you mean to say that the regulations under which you operate are such that in a situation of this character, you have such discretionary power that you may dismiss an inquiry of that character?
You use your common sense.
Without further word?
You use your common sense, and the man on the Frankfurt apparently was not using his at the time.
I know, but the theory upon which you were angered was that the Frankfurt was closer to you than any other ship.
The Frankfurt was the first one. We had not got the position. We could not say he was nearer. The signals were stronger.
Now, Mr. Bryan, I would like to ask you whether your dismissing the somewhat tardy inquiry from the Frankfurt was due to the fact that you were in constant communication with the Carpathia. Understand me?
Well, it appeared to Mr. Phillips and me, sir, that the Carpathia was the only thing we could hope for at the time when we told the Frankfurt to keep out of it.
In other words, you held on to a certainty rather than an uncertainty.
Yes, sir.
The results of your communication with the Carpathia were such as led you to believe that the operator on the Carpathia and the officers of that ship understood fully your position and the danger you were in,
Yes, sir.
and were coming toward you at full speed.
Yes, sir.
In that situation, if the Frankfurt had been 20 miles nearer the Titanic than the Carpathia, would you still have thought, from what you knew of the ship's condition, that it was wise to confine your communications to the Carpathia?
Had we known the Frankfurt's position, having already got the Carpathia's position, we should have used our judgment, and had the Frankfurt been any reasonable distance nearer, we should have informed the Frankfurt of the whole business and repeated each word we said to him about a dozen times to make sure he got it.
Her position, however, was an object of some speculation.
Yes, sir.
And your only reason for thinking the Frankfurt was nearer, if I understood you, was because of the strength of this wireless current
Yes, sir.
and the fact that it first responded.
No, sir.
The strength of the current.
Yes, sir.
I want you to tell, in order that the record may contain it, just how you distinguish between the velocities of currents in wireless telegraphy, the strength of the signals.
When a ship is working wireless, there is no trouble whatever in reading her signals. You can read the signals through one telephone. When you have one telephone off, you can read them through one telephone. When a ship gets 100 miles off, you have to have both telephones on and devote your attention to it. And as the ship gets farther and farther away, the difficulty in reading the signals increases and the strength of the signals decreases.
Decreases.
Yes, sir.
That would depend somewhat upon the equipment or apparatus
Certainly.
with which the Frankfurt was equipped.
Certainly.
Do you know anything about the character of the wireless apparatus on the Frankfurt?
No, sir.
Do you know what company installed that service?
No, sir.
You do not know whether it was the Marconi company or not.
No, sir.
Mr. Marconi, do you know how the Frankfurt is equipped?
The Frankfurt is, I believe, a ship belonging to North German Lloyd. She is equipped by a German company. called Debit Company. It means a lot of things in German, each letter, which I will not go into, of which I am a director.
You are a director in the German company,
Yes.
and you are familiar with the wireless equipment apparatus?
I am not familiar with the wireless equipment of that particular ship.
So that you would be unable to make a comparative statement, to make a comparison between the equipment or apparatus on the Carpathia and the apparatus on the Frankfurt.
I would be unable, sir, to do it.
Would the fact that the Frankfurt is equipped with an apparatus of German type in any way lessen their interest in calls made through the Marconi machine or apparatus?
No, because it is a Marconi apparatus. It is made in Germany, but it is made under my patents, under an arrangement which we have with German interests.
Let me ask you, are the regulations of Germany with reference to the operation and use of wireless telegraphy in perfect harmony with the Berlin Convention?
Absolutely. They were enacted at Berlin, and most of them were inspired by the German government.
Are these calls that are recognized, prescribed in the Berlin Convention?
The call of the Berlin Convention, which has only been recently introduced, is this SOS call, but the Marconi companies have used and use the CQD call. The Frankfurt, which was equipped with wireless, belonged to one of what I might call the Marconi companies, because I would not be a director of the company if it was not associated with us.
Would you think that any confusion would arise growing out of this international arrangement of signal with the Marconi signal?
No. I should state that the international signal is really less well known than the Marconi company signal.
So the CQD call must have been understood in its full significance by the Frankfurt operator.
I have got absolutely no doubt as to that.
And under the regulations, would that be sufficient
That would be sufficient.
to bring relief?
Yes.
I want to know this before I get away from it. I want to know whether the communications between the Titanic and the Carpathia were not also within the radius of the Frankfurt. I would like to know whether these communications could have been picked up by the Frankfurt.
Certainly they could have been.
Had the operator on the Frankfurt shown vigilance?
Certainly. He ought to have heard every word that passed between us.
When you told him to keep out, you were guarding against that thing?
We were guarding against his interfering with other communications which we might establish, and we had already established.
How could it interfere with you?
Because you cannot read two ships at once.
Have you any reason to believe that the signals given by the Titanic to the Carpathia and the replies of the Carpathia or the Olympic were received by the Frankfurt?
No, sir.
You have no reason to assume that that was the case.
I could not tell. If he was listening, he would have heard them. If he was not listening, he could not hear them.
No messages came, involved or otherwise, that would indicate that the Frankfurt had gotten any other information than the information you first gave her.
No, sir.
In order that the record may contain the answer, I would like to know whether it would have taken any longer or any more effort for you to have sent the same message to the Frankfurt that was sent to the Carpathia when you realized that you were in imminent danger. Is there any code signal for fool?
No, sir.
It would have taken no more time to apprise the Frankfurt of your perilous condition, growing more so all the time since the CQD call?
He did not acknowledge receipt of that when we told him he was a fool and tell him to keep out.
As a matter of fact, it would not have taken any more time to say, "We are sinking," than it would have taken to have told him, "You are a fool."
I assume Mr. Phillips thought that if he did not get our first CQD, which was sent slowly and carefully by Mr. Phillips, he would not get anything else.
Do you think he understood your message that he was a fool?
I doubt it. I think it was sent too fast for him.
I gather from what you say that you have not much confidence in the ability of the operator on the Frankfurt.
There ought to have been no question raised, sir, as to what he should have done as to our CQD call.
Mr. Bride, you remained with Mr. Phillips at the apparatus how long?
All the time.
After the boilers were submerged, after the customary power had been submerged, did you have a reserve power on the Titanic?
The customary power was not submerged.
Not submerged?
No, sir, not submerged.
At no time?
Not to my knowledge.
Was there a reserve power source?
There was a reserve power on the top deck.
But you had no occasion to use it.
The motor and the alternator that was working with our wireless set were running when we left the cabin 10 minutes before the ship went down.
Did you continue to send messages? Oh, Mr. Phillips, up to the time you left the cabin?
When we had finished with the Frankfurt, and we had thoroughly informed the Carpathia of our position, Mr. Phillips went out again to look and see how things were going outside. I tried to establish a communication with the Baltic, and it was not very satisfactory. And I judged myself from the strength of her signals that she was too far away to do any good, and it was not worth taking the train any trouble. And I told her we were sinking fast, and told her that there was no hope of saving the ship.
Told who?
The Baltic.
Did Mr. Phillips return from the deck?
Yes, sir.
To the room?
Yes, sir.
What did he say to you then?
He told us he thought it was time that we put on our lifebelts.
Did you act upon his suggestion?
Yes, sir.
And both of you put on your lifebelts?
Yes, sir.
At that time, had all the lifeboats been lowered?
I could not say, sir.
You paid no attention to lifeboats?
Mr. Phillips told me that things looked very queer outside. Beyond that, I knew nothing.
How did you interpret the word queer?
The sooner we were out of it, the better.
What did you do then, Mr. Bride?
Mr. Phillips sat down again at the telephone and gave a general call of CQD. But I think that our lamps were running down. We did not get a spark. We couldn't tell because the spark of our wireless was in an enclosed room. We could not hear at any time whether it was sparking.
When Mr. Phillips sat down to the instrument, did he have a life preserver on, and did you put one on?
Yes, sir.
And did you put one on?
Yes, sir.
Immediately?
Yes, sir.
But after he had put the life preserver on, he tried and succeeded, as I understand you, in sending a last message. And that message was CQD and anything else.
General CQD, MGY, waiting for someone to answer.
What did you do then, Mr. Bride?
On Mr. Phillips' request, I started to gather up his spare money and put on another coat and made general preparations for leaving the ship.
How did you expect to leave the ship?
We had to wait until the captain told us first.
You had to wait until the captain told you?
Yes, sir. He came along in a very short period afterwards and told us we had better look out for ourselves.
You waited until the captain told you that you could leave the ship?
Yes, sir.
How long was that before the ship disappeared?
I should say it was just about a quarter of an hour.
About 15 minutes.
About 15 minutes.
And the captain said, you had better take care of yourselves?
Yes, sir.
Did he indicate what he was going to do?
No, sir.
Where was he when he said this?
He came around the cabin to tell us.
He came round to your cabin?
Yes, sir.
Was there anyone else on deck?
Oh, there were other people on the deck.
With you?
Yes, they were running around all over the place.
How running around?
Several people looking for life belts and looking for refreshments.
I want to locate exactly the position of this operating room of yours with reference to the boat deck or upper deck. Is it at the rear of the A or B deck?
I believe on the Titanic, sir, the boat deck was called the A deck. There was no deck above that, with the exception of a little deck which covered the roofs of the houses that were on the A deck.
These people that you say were running around the decks, all of them.
The officers' quarters were situated together with the Marconi cabin, the officers' rooms, and other places. And the people were running around through those cabins. We had a woman in our cabin who fainted.
A woman in your cabin who had fainted?
Yeah, and we were giving her a glass of water there and a chair. We sat her down on a chair, which she wanted badly, and then her husband took her away again.
You gave her a glass of water and revived her, and her husband took her away?
Yes, sir.
Did they have on life preservers?
Yes, sir.
But some of these passengers or persons were without life belts at that time and were looking for them.
Yes, sir.
You and your assistant had on life belts, and after this final message, CQD and MGY, that was the last you saw of the wireless apparatus.
Yes, sir.
Did you see any lifeboats after that?
No, sir.
Do you know whether there was any on the ship at that time?
There were no big lifeboats on the ship at that time. There was a collapsible boat on the top deck at the side of the forward funnel.
You mean over the officers' quarters?
Over the officers' cabin, sir.
Do you know what was done with that?
Yes, sir.
What was done with it?
It was pushed over onto the boat deck.
What was done then with it?
Went over the side.
You never saw it?
Yes, I went over with it.
He says it went over the side.
I understand what the second officer said about it. I want to know whether you saw it again.
Yes, sir. It went over the side of the ship. It was washed off by a wave.
It was washed over the side of the ship by a wave
Yes, sir.
and fell into the water,
Yes, sir.
bottom side upward.
Yes, sir.
And how far were you from the water when you saw this boat fall?
I was in the boat.
You were in the boat.
Yes, sir.
It fell the bottom side upward.
Yes, sir.
What became of you?
I was inside the boat.
You were under the boat.
Yes.
How long did you remain in the boat?
I could not tell you.
About how long?
It seemed a lifetime to me, really.
I understand, but I would like to know, if possible, if at any time you got on top of the boat?
I got on top of the boat eventually.
Eventually.
Yes, sir.
Before anyone else got on top of it?
No, sir.
Who was on top of the boat when you got on?
There was a big crowd on top when I got on. I had to get away from under the bottom.
You remained under the boat how long?
I should say about 3/4 of an hour or a half.
Was there breathing space under the boat when it was turned over in that way?
Yes, sir.
So that you got away from it as quickly as you could?
Yes, sir.
You got out free from it, or did you cling to it, pulling yourself up to the side?
I freed myself from it and cleared out of it.
How did you get back to it then?
Swam back eventually.
Which side of the boat was that on, port or starboard?
On the port side of the Titanic.
Did you hear the second officer yesterday say that the boat came around from the starboard side to the port side?
I was not here yesterday.
You cannot say as to that.
It went straight over the port side, sir.
It went straight over the port side.
It was on the port side of the forward funnel. We pushed it on the port side of the boat deck, and it went over the port side of the Titanic.
Did it at any time get on the starboard side?
Not to my knowledge.
You say there were a number of people on the boat, on the bottom of the boat that was bottom up when you got there.
Yes.
Do you know any of them?
I heard afterwards that the senior operator was on board.
Mr. Phillips
Mr. Phillips.
was on the boat.
Yes, I heard so afterwards.
He did not survive, however.
He did not survive.
Do you know whether he died going from the Titanic to the Carpathia?
He died on the way, yes. He died on board the upturned boat.
What became of his body?
As far as I know, it was taken on board the Carpathia and buried from the Carpathia.
Buried at sea.
Buried from the Carpathia.
Did anyone else die on that boat between the wreck and the Carpathia?
There was a man lying aft that they said was dead when they took him onto the ship's boat.
What did they do with his body?
He was taken on board the Carpathia, as far as I know.
They took his body to the Carpathia.
Yes.
How many people were on that boat?
It was estimated between 30 and 40.
Were there any women on the boat?
No, sir.
How many people were in the boat or on the boat when it fell from the upper deck to the lower deck?
There was not anybody in it. It was pushed over intentionally.
Was it fastened to the boat davits?
No, sir. It was resting on a proper bed there for it.
How did you get in it?
When it was pushed over onto the A deck, we all scrambled down onto the A deck again.
You all scrambled in.
We did not scramble in. We scrambled down onto the A deck and we were going to launch it properly.
Then what happened?
It was washed overboard before we had a time to launch it.
The boat was washed over.
Yes, sir.
You then went down with it.
I happened to be nearest it and I grabbed it.
You grabbed it and went down with it.
Yes, sir.
Did anyone else grab it?
No, sir.
You went down with it alone.
Yes, sir.
It fell in such shape that you were under it.
Yes, sir.
You say there were no women on that boat
No, sir.
when it reached the Carpathia or at any other time.
No, sir.
And there were about 35 or 40 people altogether.
Yes, sir.
Do you know any of the people that were on that boat besides Mr. Phillips and yourself?
There was an officer, I believe, on that boat.
An officer?
And there was a passenger. I could not see whether he was first, second, or third.
What kind of a looking man?
I could not say, sir.
Have you learned who it was?
No, sir. I heard him say at the time he was a passenger.
Was it Colonel Gracie?
I could not say. He merely said he was a passenger.
Where did he get on?
I could not say. I was the last man they invited on board.
Were there others struggling to get on?
Yes, sir.
How many?
Dozens.
Dozens. In the water?
Yes, sir.
With life preservers on?
Yes, sir.
Was this one man the only passenger?
I could not say.
Did anyone say to you that anyone else was a passenger?
No, sir. We did not have much to say to each other.
You did not talk to one another?
No, sir.
Do you know whether the other occupants of the boat were officers or seamen or stewards or employees?
I should judge they were all employees. They were all part of the boat's crews.
They were all in the water.
They'd all been in the water at some time or another.
They had been in the water at some time when they got onto the upturned boat.
Yes.
When did you last see the captain? When he told you to take care of yourself?
The last I saw of the captain, he went overboard from the bridge, sir.
Did you see the Titanic sink?
Yes, sir.
And the captain was at that time on the bridge?
No, sir.
What do you mean by overboard?
He jumped overboard from the bridge. He jumped overboard from the bridge when we were launching the collapsible lifeboat.
I should judge from what you have said that this was about 3 or 4 minutes before the boat sank?
Yes, it would be just about 5 minutes before the boat sank.
About 5 minutes?
Yes.
Do you know whether the captain had a life belt on?
He had not when I last saw him.
He had not.
No, sir.
Did the bridge go underwater at about the same time?
Yes, sir. The whole of the ship was practically underwater to the forward funnel. And when I saw her go down, the stern came out of the water and she slid down fore and aft.
The captain at no time went over until the vessel sank.
No, sir.
He went with the vessel.
Practically speaking, yes, sir.
I would like to ask you, before I forget it, whether as this vessel went down, there was much suction there?
No, sir.
There was not?
No, sir.
The fact that so few of the passengers and crew were picked up by the Carpathia with life preservers on would seem to indicate that they were sucked under these waves or this water as the ship disappeared. What is your judgment about that?
I estimate I was within 150 feet of the Titanic. I was swimming when she went down, and I felt practically no suction at all.
Mr. Bride, I appreciate the fact that you're not well. I want to thank you very much for your uncomplaining, kindly attitude. I will not press you any further today, but I wish you would hold yourself subject to the call of the committee and be prepared to respond if we should want you again. May I have this understanding, Mr. Marconi?
All right.
We will take a recess until 3 o'clock.
At 1:45 p.m., the committee took a recess until 3 p.m. The expiration of that recess, the hearing was resumed.
Is Mr. Bride, the wireless operator of the Titanic, present?
No, sir.
Where has he gone?
He has gone to some house uptown where he's going to be looked after, sir.
Has he gone to some hospital?
No, Senator. He has gone to the house of some relative of his. I heard you tell him that you were not going to call to question him anymore today, so I sent him along.
I should like to ask him a few additional questions this afternoon, but it will be impossible if he is not here.
I'm sorry, Senator. We understood from what you had said that you had finished with him for today.
In view of his physical condition, I think his further examination may not be postponed.
You remember saying, Senator, that you would not question him anymore today.
Yes, I do. I do not hold you responsible at all for his not coming here now.
We thought you had finished with him for today.
It's all right. There's no responsibility on you at all. Merely thought that if he was here, I should like to ask him a question. The other operator is here.
Yes, sir, and he will remain here if you wish him.
Is the second officer of the Titanic here?
He's not in the room, Senator. He's out around the hotel somewhere. So you mean Lighthauler?
Yes.
Mr. Lighthauler is not present, we find, but he will be back soon.
I wanted to ask Mr. Lighthauler if the ship's log was saved.
Any of the other officers can tell you just as well about that. Mr. Pittman is here, for instance.
Yeah, very well. Mr. Pittman, I will swear you as a witness for a moment, just for the sake of completing our record. State your full name, please.
Herbert John Pittman,
Where do you reside?
England.
At what place?
Somerset.
Somerset, England.
Yes, sir.
How old are you?
34.
What is your business?
Mariner.
How long have you been employed as a mariner?
16 years.
In what capacities?
From apprentice to an officer.
I should like to know whether you are sufficiently advised of your own knowledge to say whether the ship's log was preserved or taken from the Titanic.
Not to my knowledge. I did not go into the chart room, so I do not know.
Do you know whether Mr. Lighthauler, the second officer, Mr. Boxall, the fourth officer, or Mr. Lowe, the fifth officer, took possession of the ship's log?
I cannot say, sir.
I will make a brief announcement for the official reporter and for the press that after conference with my colleagues of the committee, we have concluded to subpoena Mr. J. Bruce Ismay, Mr. P.A.S. Franklin, Mr. Harold Bride, Mr. H.T. Cottam, Mr. C.L. Lighthauler, second officer, Mr. H.J. Pittman, third officer, Mr. J.G. Boxall, fourth officer, Mr. H.G. Lowe, fifth officer, and others, they being the only surviving officers of the Titanic, also others of the crew. We have also subpoenaed W. Perkis, E. Archer, W. H. Taylor, W. Bryce, E. J. Bewley, S. S. Hemming, F. O. Evans, T. Jones, Frank Osmond, G. Moore, A. Cunningham, A. Oliver, F. Fleet, G. A. Hogg, A. Crawford, W. Burke, Edward Wheelton, F. Clench, Fred D. Ray, G. F. Crow, C. E. Andrews, J. Widgery, H. S. Etches, G. T. Rowe, John Collins, A. J. Bright, G. Simmons, J. Hardy, and Albert Haynes of the ship's crew. All of these witnesses have been summoned to appear in Washington on Monday morning at 10 o'clock. At that time, this investigation will be resumed. No further testimony will be taken at this hearing. I've been asked to make a public statement. Before doing so, I request no representative of the press or other person shall ask any question of me before beginning or during my statement or after I have finished. What I say, I desire reported accurately, and I wish the public to know that this statement is the only official utterance I shall make before resuming our inquiry in Washington. The object of this committee in coming to New York, coincident with the arrival of the Carpathia, was prompted by the desire to avail ourselves of first-hand information from the active participants in this sad affair. Our course has been guided solely by this purpose, to obtain accurate information without delay. Information had been received that some of the officers of the Titanic and the managing director of the White Star Line, who are British subjects residing in England, desired and intended to return to their homes immediately upon arrival at this port. We concluded it would be most unfortunate if we were deprived of their testimony for any indefinite period, and felt that their removal beyond the jurisdiction of our authority might complicate, possibly defeat, our purpose. We went directly to the Carpathia upon her arrival, were received courteously by the captain and officers of that ship, and were accorded with a prompt interview with the managing director and vice president of the White Star Line. We requested the attendance of these officers, the other surviving officers, and that the crew might be held subject to our orders. We satisfied ourselves that the promises of Mr. Ismay and Mr. Franklin could be relied upon, felt assured of their presence at the hearing Friday morning, and did not feel called upon to use more drastic means to accomplish that result. Mr. Ismay intended to return to England forthwith, but at our request has remained here, as have the other officers and members of the crew. It was found necessary to take the testimony of Captain Rostron of the Carpathia immediately. in order that he might not be further inconvenienced in his departure with his ship, destined for the Mediterranean, after his most creditable conduct in a most trying emergency, worthy of the highest praise. We felt it would not be an evidence of our appreciation of his gallantry, thoughtfulness, efficiency to detain him and his ship and passengers longer after he had brought the survivors of the Titanic voluntarily to this port. The survivors of the Titanic and their friends throughout the world are under a debt of gratitude to Captain Rostron, which can never be repaid. His promptness in responding to the call of distress resulted in a large saving of life, which, but for him, would have been impossible. And voicing the sentiments of my countrymen, I thank him in their name and in the name of the government of the United States for his unselfish and noble contribution to the cause of humanity. We examined the second officer of the Titanic, Mr. Lightoller, because he was in command during the hours immediately preceding the collision, and we thought it wise to take his testimony immediately. Mr. Bride is a telegrapher on the Titanic who survived, had been injured, and was unable to conveniently be moved from New York. And as the testimony of the wireless operator of the Carpathia was so intimately related to the testimony of the surviving operator of the Titanic, we concluded to take the testimony of both forthwith. And in order that we might, beyond peradventure, have the statement of Mr. Ismay officially upon our records, we decided to take his testimony immediately. At the conclusion of the examination, all the witnesses were notified of the fact that we had not finished with them, and were requested to remain subject to the orders of this committee. After conference with my associates, we concluded to exercise our authority and formally subpoena all of the surviving officers of the Titanic, including those just mentioned and others not sworn, together with about 30 members of the ship's crew. This has been done, and further testimony for the present will be taken at Washington, where all the members of the subcommittee can be present. In summoning the surviving passengers, many of whom were weak and greatly distressed, some quite ill, others injured, we have thought it wise to proceed with care and consideration for their physical and mental condition. Many of them have already been subpoenaed, but returns have not yet been made, and I am unable to give the names of those subpoenaed to the press today. In closing this statement, I desire to acknowledge our debt of gratitude to the representatives of the press for their marked consideration and courtesy in this most trying situation, and wish to assure them that everything that has transpired of public interest has been entirely in their presence, and that this course will be pursued, so far as I am concerned, in the future hearings before the committee.
Whereupon, at 3:30 p.m., the subcommittee adjourned to meet in Washington at 10:30 a.m., Monday, April 22nd, 1912. Thank you for joining us for day 2 of the Titanic disaster hearings. A big thanks to our friend, your friendly neighborhood Shakespeare, for hosting this on his pages. A huge thank you to all the actors who read for us this evening. Thank you all so very much for joining us. If you enjoyed this reading, all of our readings are available on our website or on YouTube or on Facebook at facebook.com/zenithplayers. If you would like to read with us in one of these readings, send us a message on Facebook at Zenith Players, or send us an email to casting@zenithplayers.com, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. As always, we want to thank all the medical professionals, essential workers. Thank you all so very much. Join us next week as we spin the wheel of Shakespeare for The Tempest. Thank you, and good night.